Cloud is the most popular IT buzzword of the last decade, but despite the hype, it's a concept which has revolutionized IT departments and the way they deliver their services. Using cloud, firms are able to give users access to software from any location with an internet connection. They can get access to vast amounts of storage or compute power and only use and pay for it when it's needed. And similarly, they can use the platform they need, for example to develop or test applications, without needing to buy or manage the necessary software and hardware layers. Cloud can broadly be divided into two camps, public and private. Public cloud, being accessible over the internet, available for public use and often involving multi-tenanted architecture. In private cloud, the infrastructure is operated and used by a single organisation. But that's not quite the full picture. There's actually a third camp, hybrid cloud. This is a composition of two or more clouds using both public and private services. Firms generally look to a hybrid cloud to offer the best of both worlds, the flexibility and scalability of public cloud, together with the security of the private cloud. One organisation which uses hybrid cloud today is local authority the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. I asked its CIO, Rocco Labalati, why hybrid cloud was right for him.
Okay, so as a local government council, we've clearly got to keep our eye on taxpayers' money, making sure that we get the best benefit for the investments we make. The Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead effectively had a big opportunity predicated on the fact that 4 or 5 years ago, when we had the credit crunch, we took an active decision not to invest significantly in IT during that period. What that led to was a lack of investment in infrastructure, so ageing servers and an ageing infrastructure environment. We'd also not invested in our business applications, so we were running 3, 4, 5 versions behind in terms of that. So when we got to the point that we had to make a decision, it was actually one of going in one of two directions. The first direction could have been that of reinvesting a significant amount of capital in upgrading our infrastructure, so our data center itself, and investing in upgrading the software applications. That would have been quite difficult because we're also running a number of operating systems. The option we chose to go with was effectively therefore the most cost-effective one, and that was to move into a cloud environment where the upfront investment of capital was minimal. In fact, we're probably looking at about £250,000 worth of total investment in capital and project management to move our organisation from where we were to where we want to be today. Compare that with a capital investment of over about £1.5 million if we were going to reinvest in infrastructure on premise. So that was one of the key factors in deciding to move to cloud. The decision of whether to move to a single hosted provider or to a hybrid model, which is where we ultimately went to, was really predicated on a commercial judgment. From my perspective, and certainly in conversation with many of the key stakeholders within the organisation, we didn't feel that moving to a single provider was the right way to go. It felt very much like outsourcing by another means. Whereas if we brought in 2 or 3 providers of cloud services, particularly infrastructure as a service, then we would be able to keep them competing against each other. We'd have less of a monopoly situation, more of a competitive dialogue situation ongoing, and that's why we chose to actually move in that direction. And today we're signed up now with 2 major providers in terms of hosting, and we also keep a certain amount of our systems on premises as well, just in terms of latency, bandwidth and so forth. So an interesting hybrid model of the cloud that works for us today.
Another organisation heavily invested in hybrid cloud is Tertiary Education Application Processing Service, UCAS.
UCAS provides a results day service, so in August, in the middle of August, we provide the results so that people can find out which university, that they've got into their university of choice. What we found is the demand and load, we're based in Cheltenham, was exceeding what we could provide, and we had a poor service in 2011 and 2012. So we had to look at alternative ways of sourcing. It was either going to be a big investment in upscaling our data center locally or move to a cloud providers. So we took the decision in late 2012 that that's what we were going to do. So our 2013 results day would be hosted on a cloud environment. We went through a process and we chose Azure, Microsoft Azure, we had Rackspace, and we have Amazon. So we had Azure for the .NET space, we had Amazon hosting our databases on their very large infrastructure databases, and Rackspace hosting our website.
Intel's Alan Priestley explains that firms need to treat hybrid cloud adoption as a journey, which often starts with private cloud.
Okay, so I think for many companies to start with, you need to move through the cloud process. You've got to start with sort of virtualization. You've got to really think about, okay, so what am I going to run a private cloud? You can't sort of go out to the outside world, I think, without at least having some understanding of the needs of cloud, what it does to your business. So for a lot of people, it will mean moving to private cloud. They'll then look to utilize public cloud in some form and to compensate or to combine with what they've got in their private cloud environment. So they create this hybrid environment, which is a mix between workload in the public cloud, workload in the private cloud. The data may land in different zones depending on their requirements. Sometimes they'll keep the data local to themselves, application in the public cloud, occasionally, or put the data out there. It depends on what their needs are going to be.
But building a hybrid cloud isn't as simple as virtualizing servers and renting a few instances from Amazon. New skills are needed within IT to manage this way of working, and finding those skills isn't always straightforward. Many organizations choose to outsource.
In terms of skills, we were quite lucky that we had a couple of guys that I would call real geeks, and they knew our own existing infrastructure inside and outside, and were very au fait with current cloud terminology and the premise of cloud. But two people alone are not enough, so we've actually been looking out to the market to invest in additional resource to bring in-house. We've chosen a mixed economy, really. In terms of the skills to get us to the cloud, we've been looking at third parties, certainly for the extremely competent skills that they have in certain areas, whether that be in database licensing and remodeling of the database structures, whether it be around security, particularly another area. So we brought in skills from outside consultants that have provided us with small packets of their knowledge to actually deliver the change we need. On a longer term basis, though, we've made the choice to not move to a third-party service management provision, but to bring the skills in-house, again, to ensure that we've got a competitive advantage when we're talking to the providers so that we know what we're talking about. So bringing those skills in-house is proving to be a bit of a challenge as well, because it's a new world, but we're confident we can get there.
But how does Intel advise firms to approach the issue of securing data and applications across a private cloud?
So security has always been held up as one of the barriers why big industry wouldn't go to cloud, right? Because of the data, who can access the data when it's out there. What I think business has got to do is they've got to look at what data they've got and what are the requirements of the individual pieces or types of data they have. Because there's no one size fits all. Not all data needs to be kept at the same security level, if you like, or same trust level. So they need to understand, start with what the data is they've got and where they're trying to place it. Some data they may decide they want to keep internally because it is business confidential, business critical. Other data, they may say, yeah, we can move that outside. When they look at external suppliers, I think they need to look at a number of things. How does that supplier show them that their infrastructure hasn't been compromised and prove to them that the goodness, effectively, the quality, the security of the physical infrastructure itself, the software stack, make certain no malware is in there. How is the application going to be protected from anybody snooping, anybody looking at that? Right? So they need to look at that aspect. They also need to look at the data and how it's secured in the cloud. There's a lot of discussion about how you protect access to data. Right? Do you ring fence it? Do you put traditional tools around it? We've long had this perception that security was, some software layers that prevented someone getting in. I think we need to move away from that and get to a point now where we accept, okay, people may get at the data. The question is, can they use the data? Right? Most data at the moment is kept in the open. Right? We don't secure it in any way. We don't encrypt it. And we need to move to this position which says, okay, so the data gets when we move data out, we, as a matter of policy, encrypt it, and then that controls who can access it. So even if someone gets hold of the data, right, they can't use it. And once we get to that state, right, we can look at data completely differently, and we can actually control our trust levels for the data and have a different mindset rather than saying, yeah, put a fence around it. It's in the cloud. The issue is, chances are someone may get access to it, or at the end of the day, you've got so much data out there. Are you ever going to be able to bring it back? If you can't bring it back, how do you disable it? Right. So I think proactively thinking about encrypting data and using that sort of technology on your data sets will help get over this security issue and prevent unauthorized use of the data rather than loss of the data.
UCAS approached security by choosing accredited suppliers and ensuring that their data was encrypted.
Yeah, we went through a due diligence process for security and auditing process. We made sure we had the right accreditations, we made sure our providers had the right accreditations, we designed the service with the right encryption in place, and we do periodic tests, pen tests against the applications. We put Splunk in front of the whole system, and Pervit in front of the whole system, so that that provides us the protection against a DDoS type attack.
And for Windsor and Maidenhead, Rocco Labolati describes security as the #1 concern.
Security, I think, has been the #1 criterion that we've looked at assuring, and not only because we're a local government organisation with a lot of personal private data, but also because very easily we can become a media spectacle if things go wrong. So from our perspective, it's critically important to keep that data secure, both because from a legislative perspective we need to. There are European directives, there's the Information Commissioner's Office, which is always keen to make sure that we're doing things well. There are data privacy laws as well that we need to adhere to. But having the skills and competencies internally to actually do that was something we didn't have, nor did we want to invest in bringing someone on board that knew that particularly well. So again there, we went to the outside market. We identified class consultants that could help us both in terms of setting up our security, but also in terms of practically assessing through penetration testing and IT health checks the quality of the designs that we have and the quality of the infrastructure we've got today.
So the hybrid cloud is set up, it's secure, and you have all the skills you need to run it. But what about dismantling it? One often overlooked issue is the exit strategy. How do you get out with your data intact?
Yeah, we find that we're keeping a set of the data on premise, so we use a replication service to keep a whole set of our data on premise. So if we did have an issue, we would have our data ourselves. If we wanted to exit from a provider, it would be a project to pull out of that provider. We're not locked in with any of those providers, so we can move from one to the other. We can also find that working with multiple providers gives us a cost advantage because you can effectively work with one or the other on any particular project. With the outsource deal, that's different. We have worked very careful for them and for us exit strategy clauses into the contract to make sure that if we get to the end of that contract, we want to move on, we want to bring it in-house, they will help and support the transition out of that contract.
Intel advises firms to study the SLA from any cloud provider before committing to a contract.
I think it's beholden upon anybody when they're looking at buying a cloud service to look at the SLA they're being offered, right? Not just on exit strategy, but also operational strategy. But the issue is, is exit is, as I say, could be a key thing. But then the question is, am I exiting by pulling my stuff back, or am I saying, okay, I'm disabling what I've got there? I turn it off. So I terminate my contract and I walk away from what was there, knowing that what was there cannot be used by anybody else. But we're going through a transition at the moment. But so a lot of people still need to think about, okay, so what is the conversation I have with my supplier? What happens on if possible, if something happens, if that supplier no longer exists, how do I pull my data back, or how do I get my data if that's the only copy I've got? If I want to proactively move, the application sets are pretty, are becoming standard at the moment. We're moving to abstraction layers, if you like. So we're coding to either .NET or Java. So that's portable between suppliers. Right? And an application is really the less important thing here. It's the data you've got to think about. And you do need to have that conversation, especially maybe some of the smaller guys where they may not have the financial backing to keep going for a longer period of time. You need to be conversant of that. But as I say, I think a lot of it still comes back to what we're talking about just now, is what do I do with my data? How do I look after my data? How do I secure my data? Because that then determines what my exit strategy needs to be.
So there are pitfalls for the unwary, but get the right skills to manage hybrid cloud services, either internally or outsourced, follow security best practice, and think about the exit before you even sign on the dotted line, and you'll give yourself the best chance to see the benefits of hybrid cloud whilst avoiding the worst of the headaches.